Hey everyone, we are going to start in about a minute. We are just waiting for everyone to join and then we'll start. Okay, cool. Hi everyone, are you guys able to hear me? Just drop a quick yes or no in the chat. One second, let me enable the chat, guys. Hi everyone, are you able to hear me? Audible, how are you? How are you guys doing? Thank you, Shashank. Happy Holi, yeah. First of all, happy Holi to everybody. I hope you guys will be having a lot of fun tomorrow. So yeah. Sharp haircut. We just भाई शाम को करा के आए हैं. Have office tomorrow. Are you in South India? In South India, there are a lot of offices which are open in during Holi. Like at least like this time, I'm not sure how, but like in my company Microsoft, we have a holiday. But since 2019, I've never seen any holiday on Holi. Interesting fact about Holi, in 2020, on the day of Holi, I guess on 2020, the Holi was on March 10th. My birthday comes at March 11th. That's why I guess I remember it. And one more thing happened was on the day of Holi, I had my LinkedIn interview, all 5 rounds. 5 rounds were there, all 5 rounds in one day. I thought they won't keep it, but because they don't have holidays on Holi, so my rounds were scheduled. I gave it in Bangalore only. Yeah, a lot of companies don't give. I'm not sure how, but this time Microsoft has holiday. So yeah. Cool. Let's come back. So I gave you guys a homework, right? RH is what is RH? Is it like an optional leave or something? Garvit, we have a lead code profile, but it is shared by a bunch of friends. We have a lead code prima. If you want, I can show you. I can't show you the name, but we actually use a lead code premium, and we know that lead code profile is of no use. So we use same profile, bunch of friends. One second, what happened? Why it's freezed? Just a second, guys. My screen is freezing. Yeah, Vinayak, we have just barely started. Just a second. I'm good. I'm good. So I was sharing my screen. Okay, I believe you guys are able to see my shared screen. Okay. So if I open lead code, so once again, it's not signed in. Once again, I need to sign in. Generally, lead code profile is of like absolutely end-to-end no use. You want to keep it in your resume, you keep it. Like for example, if you'll see my resume, I don't even keep it. So you can see it's a premium account that we have. and you can see we have access to everything here, all premium stuff, but we share this account. So how many problems solved? You can see there are a lot of sessions. You can see a lot of people have every different session, and in every different session there will be different number of problems. We don't even know who is solving in which session. I don't even know. You can see what 82 solved here, and you can see 100 and so we don't even know. So we share it, right? For mainly for teaching purpose and everything, but yeah. Is premium worth it? I don't think so. For students, it's not. It's expensive for students, I believe. Got it? Cool. So I gave you guys the homework, right? Yeah, I'm sharing my screen again. Can you guys see my shared screen, everybody? Okay. How many of you guys attempted it? I saw Parth mentioning me that he has completed the homework. I have a doubt. If I fork a repo that has a master branch, then add two features in two different branches and create a PR, will these two branches get merged in master branch only when the PR is approved / merged? Also, since I have forked repo, can't I just merge both of the branches in master in forked version? Okay, so Parth, what happens is, one second. Why is this throwing an error? Okay, I'll see. Up. Did I do something? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So Parth, what happens is that, for example, if you go to GitHub, like it's an interesting question with respect to kind of like open source contributions if you're looking at. Okay. So let's say you have a repo here, right? For example, this is a repo of front end. Okay. It's a front end project. Okay. Now, when you actually fork this, like I'm the owner, so I can't fork it. But let's say if you fork it, you kind of like create a same copy of the repo on your profile. Okay. Now, there are two things. One, first is that let's say if you work in a company, then probably what will happen is the CTO or the dev lead, whosoever it is, he or she will give you the access directly to the repo. So you don't need to fork the repo, and you will be having a direct access to commit on this repo. Are able to get this point? But let's say, for example, in case of open source contribution, people don't give you access because then like we don't know who is legitimate and who is not. Okay. Guys, also, is my voice audible to everybody? Am I audible and everybody is able to understand properly? Vinayak, in case there is a lag on your end, please refresh. Okay, I've enabled the everyone chat. Right, audio video looks good. 1 second, let me just quickly ping back. Okay, cool. So now let's say in case of open source contribution, what you do is you create a fork. For example, you can see there are a bunch of pull requests that are coming up here, right? So let's say I'll open a pull request. Okay. You can see, let's say if I open this pull request. Now, can you see this pull request is coming from this guy, Kenil Kanani, and his branch feature into my profile, Singh Sanket master branch. So from his profile, he has actually made a PR to my profile. Pretty good looking PR, to be very honest. But he has actually created a PR from there. And if I open it, you can see now we have been redirected to Kenil Kanani's account. Can I say that? Right. So that's how things are done. If you want, you don't have access to merge in my master. If I have to merge it, for example, let's see what changes are there. There are not much. He has added React icons and added a use ref, use effect. Okay, so there are a lot of changes, so I need to review it. But let's see if we have a very small PR, then I'll show you. Do we have a very small PR? Okay. So this is already I have manually done. Okay, but I'll show you some closed PRs. For example, you can see this is a closed PR. I've merged it. So what happens is that I will actually manually merge it. I need to actually manually merge it altogether. Make sense? So I will be reviewing it. If there are any comments, I'll drop some comments and then I'll manually merge the PR correspondingly. Is this point making sense, guys? So that's how open source contributions are done. Like if you will go to my profile, like when I contributed for Harvard, like you can see, this is the original Harvard repo. This is from Berkman Center, right? Sorry. This is the original Berkman Center repo. And if you go to my profile and search for question tool, you can see I have a forked question tool on my branch. So what I used to do, I used to raise a PR here. So if you go to pull requests, right? If you go to the closed ones, can you see? I used to raise a PR from my forked repo. You can see my forked repo feature remote control highlight to Berkman Center's dev branch. Can you see? That's how things were done. So that's how generally in open source things are done. Got it? Any more questions from anybody? Okay, cool. So let's come back. Okay. So, so there are a bunch of peers. Oh, both from Parth. Let's see. So Parth created an issue himself. So I'll show you Parth in case. Let's try to maybe merge your request. Okay. So let's see, one file changed. So I gave you a homework to add a custom JSON error when to do not found. And this looks good to me. So you can see what Parth has done. Parth has used a wildcard here. What is question mark in Java? It's wildcard, right? In Java. So, and this is a wildcard. Wildcard means anything can actually come up. Anything can actually come up. So this is a correct solution altogether. Can you guys see this, everyone? This was one solution that I was expecting. So Parth, let's see what happens is, let's say if I go to your PR, this is your PR. If there are any issues or anything that I have, I'll maybe comment back on the PR. If everything looks good to me, maybe I'll just comment back LGTM so that you know that everything is good to go. And then what I'll do is I can maybe merge your pull request. Now your pull request is from your branch to my master branch. I'll merge it. When I merge it, this gets merged to my master branch, but where? On GitHub. On GitHub. Now you can see when I merge it on GitHub, the changes won't come on my local, right? What do I have to do is I need to pull the changes from GitHub. Git pull origin master. Now the changes are up and you can see now your changes are here. So that's how your PRs gets merged. Parth. Make sense? Ideally, what I should have done was I should have technically pulled your PR in a different branch, tested your changes, and then merged. But I can see it's a pretty straightforward and a simple change. So we don't need to bother a lot about it. Make sense, guys? Okay, one second. I guess there is a screen freeze issue going on. One second, guys. Okay, so but if there is a conflict, will that reflect in your master? If there is a conflict, it will automatically show me that there is a conflict. And what will happen is I will not merge your PR. If there is a conflict, I will not merge it, right? Yep, Akash, your solution also looks good to me. Abhijit says, please check mine as well. Sure, Abhijit, let me check your solution also. Abhijit, it would be really nice if you could have just raised a PR so I could have just seen the main changes. But for now, I'll go and check your actual code base altogether. Okay, you have added delete and everything as well. Good. Very good for put mapping. Cool. Yeah, looks good to me. Okay. Rest of the people, I have also done homework. Please check once. Yeah. Rest of the people, I would request you to just share it to me on Discord. I believe there. No, I'm not sharing my screen. I believe there it would be relatively more easy for me to actually check rather than consuming class time. Okay. But yeah, most of the solution looks good to me. Okay. So, 1 second. Okay. Let's come back. So in the last class, we talked about path variables and everything, and we saw what are path variables and everything, right? Remember? Okay. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to see a bunch of new things. Okay. What we are going to do is we are going to see a bunch of new things. Okay. So let's see. You can see that there, here we have a get mapping, here we have a post mapping, another get mapping altogether, right? Everybody is able to see my shared screen. Everyone is able to see my shared screen, guys. Okay. And in fact, let's do one thing. Just, yep, cool. Okay. So now what you can actually do is, let's say I want to add some query params. Okay. Let's say I want to maybe filter my to-dos. So carefully, if you see, we have get to-dos, right? Here we are getting all the to-dos. But let's say I don't want to just directly get all the to-dos. Maybe I want to filter them based on the fact that whether they are completed or not, right? Let's say I only want to get those to-dos which are completed. Now for filtering, if you remember, I always mentioned that what you can do is you can expect query params. Now, how do you expect query params? If you remember, for path params or URL params, you have path variable. For request body, you have @request body. For query params, you have something like request params. So you can say @request param. Okay. In request param, what you can do is you can mention which param you are actually expecting. So let's say we are expecting something like string is completed. Okay. We are expecting something like string is completed. Okay. And what I'm going to do is for now, I'll just print it. Incoming query params is completed. Okay. Let's say I'll just print it all together. Okay. I'll just print it here. Okay. So let's do one thing. Let's open Postman. Just a second, guys. Actually, my monitor is kind of like hanging a bit. Just a second. Should not do it, but just a minute, guys. Okay. Let me reshare my screen. Okay. This is Postman. Can you guys see my Postman screen? Can you guys see Postman here? Okay. Cool. Dismiss. Let's open Springboard to do app. Get all to dos. Okay. Get all to dos. Now, let's say we try to make a get all to dos request. Okay. And here, let's say we want to add query params. Now you can add manually query params here like this, or you can see there is a params option. In here, you can mention your key value pairs like is completed. And let's say I want to send it as true. Okay. Let's turn up the server. Let's wait for a moment for the server to come up. You can see the server is up. Now let's send this request. If you send it, currently we are getting all the to-dos, but let's see if we were able to receive incoming params or not. And can you see incoming query params received as true? See? Okay. And let's put it like this. Okay. And let's say if you send the incoming params as false, if you send incoming params as false, okay. So what will happen is, let's see, if I send it, you can see now it is coming as false. Now, interestingly, we don't want it to be in the form of a string, right? Because we have is the completed property a Boolean. So we have to then compare it with a Boolean, right? So here we will require a Boolean. Okay. Now what will happen is, if instead of string you are expecting a Boolean, then if I turn up the server, you can see server is up. And now if I send the request again, you can see everything will work fine. And we are able to receive false again, but this time it is a Boolean. And who actually handled the conversion? Because from here, it is a part of the URL, right? Who is actually handling the part of the conversion? Spring Boot is actually handling the part of the conversion. And now we have access to a Boolean here. And now what you can do is, instead of returning the whole to-do list, you can actually filter your to-do list altogether. Okay. This is something that we can actually do. But there is one problem. Let's say I don't send is completed. What will happen in that case? If I send the request, it says bad request. Why it says bad request? It says bad request because this particular API is now expecting a Boolean, right? This particular API is now expecting a Boolean. And it is expecting it in a mandatory form. It is expecting it in a mandatory form. But generally, query params are not mandatory. Maybe you can send some query params, maybe not. So what you can do is, this @request param annotation actually expects a bunch of values. First, what you can do is, you can give it a value required equals to false. If in a parenthesis you say required is equals to false, then what will happen is, this Boolean will not be a mandatory query param that my API will expect. It will be an optional. If I run it, and now if I send it, you can see now things are working. I'm not sending is completed, still things are working. If I send is completed, then also things are working. Okay. Now, interestingly, when I did not send anything around is completed, let's say if I send is completed as true, you can see it is receiving as true. But let's say if I not send anything in is completed, what it is taking? It is taking a default value of a Boolean. What is the default value of a Boolean? It's false, right? But at least it's not breaking our API just because we didn't send a query param. And there can be cases when you don't want to send a query param. Okay. Apart from that, there is one more property in this request param that you can set. After putting a comma, you can say default value, and you can set a default value. Let's say something like true. Then what will happen is, let's put it like this here. And now if you set a default value true, then what will happen? Every time its value is going to be by default set as true. Okay, this should be, I guess, in the form of a string. Now what will happen is, if I stop the server and maybe restart it, and let's say I don't send is completed and send the request. Okay, can you see now it is coming as true? So what it will do is, it will automatically convert this string to a Boolean true and then get the value automatically here. And now we can actually apply the logic of filtering based on the fact that what Boolean value is we are actually getting. So this is something that you can actually do in order to make sure that you are able to receive query params also inside your API. Time for questions. So instead of wildcard, we could have, yes, Vinayak, that solution could have been also correct. Instead of wildcard, you could have just expected a response entity object altogether. Like that solution could have also worked. Okay. One second, guys. Let me remove the secondary screen for a moment. Okay, cool. How to not filter by a parameter if it is not passed? You can put a, you can again put a Boolean check that whether you are actually receiving a parameter or not, right? When we log into any page, we send username and password. That time we use which type of params? I think we use URL params. Somnath. Now, username and password is a sensitive information. If username and password is a pretty sensitive information, then ideally what you should do, you should not send it in URL params or query params, because then it can get cached in your history. Ideally, you should send it in body params. If you pass default value, so required is not required. You can say that, like, it's the same as your default parameters in a function. Make sense, guys? Make sense, everyone? Can we use Boolean instead of it can be null? Yes, Ashwin, I was coming to that particular point only. So guys, one interesting thing that you can actually see here is, now, how do you identify whether somebody actually passed this parameter or not if you keep a primitive Boolean? In that case, what you can actually do is, instead of primitive Boolean, let's say if we convert it to an object Boolean. Okay. Now let's see what happens. If I run the code, okay, and let's say I go to, let me share my desktop. 1 second. Okay. Let's share Postman here. Now, if you carefully see, then if I send is completed to true or false, now what is going to happen? If I send it, you can see the request is working fine, right? And if, let's say, you see here, you are receiving the value as true. Now this object Boolean is automatically getting converted to true. But if you don't send anything and you send the request here, then you are taking the default value as true. Now let's do one thing. Let's remove the default value. Okay, and send it. And if you send the request now, can you see we are receiving the value as null? So now what you can do is you can put a null check, that if is completed is equal to null, then you have to always return the to-do list. If it is not, then whatever is the value coming up, you can filter your to-do list based on that. As simple as that. Make sense, everyone? So this was query params. That we had to discuss. Okay. Cool. Now, a few things that I want to, here null is coming because we are using Boolean as object. Yes, because we are using that capital B Boolean. That's why null is actually coming up. Make sense? Now, an interesting topic that I want to talk about is about beans. How many of you guys know what is beans? Garvit says it is object. Okay. What about the rest of the people? Spring handled object. Okay. Anyone else? Beans are instances of objects created in Spring container. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Abhishek says no idea. Have not used them, but have heard about them. There are classes with quality standards such as servlet errors. I don't think that defines what is a bean. Spring classes, I guess. Defining which object is dependent on other object. I believe that's the responsibility of IOC containers, but okay, I'll still take that. They're like bucket that contains and manages cycle. Pojo class, set of properties. Okay, let's see. So there are a bunch of comments that are coming up. And you will hear this word beans a lot. You will hear this word beans a lot of times from me. You will hear this word beans a lot of time in a lot of Spring Boot related discussions altogether. Okay. Now, what is beans and why do you need it? Now, you know, in Java, everything is an object. Can I say that? In plain Java, and we should not say everything is an object. Like, there are primitives and there are non-primitives. Non-primitives are your objects. But in Java, if you want to play with anything custom, you need these objects altogether. Can I say that? Can I say that? Okay. Now, somebody in the last class was actually asking me one thing, that, sir, we did not actually create this to-do controller class object ourselves. Can I say that? Can I say that, guys? Right. I just created this class. And that's it. And this class immediately started working. But if you have seen any like maybe DSA Java code or like plain Java library code or something, then we have to actually manually always create object ourselves. Can I say that? Yes or no? Okay. So interestingly, what happens is that there is a concept called as inversion of control. What is inversion of control? Inversion of control means that, let's say you had to do some task, but you gave the responsibility of that task to somebody else. That's called as inversion of control. How many of you guys are able to understand it? If you're coming from a world of, let's say, Python, Java, or JavaScript, you will see inversion of control in these languages at a lot of places. For example, whenever you pass a callback function to any another function, like when you pass, let's say, lambda functions of Java, that's are kind of like callbacks, right? You pass callback function to any another function, then what you are doing? You are giving the responsibility of executing that callback to that other person, to that other function in which you have passed that callback. Same thing exists in Java as well. Like, let's say there is a function which expects a lambda expression. You wrote your lambda expression, but who is going to execute it? The function in which we are going to pass that lambda expression. Can I say that? Can I say that, guys? So this mechanism is called as inversion of control. Like, you had to do something. You were responsible of doing something, but you gave the task of that execution of that or that responsibility to somebody else, right? This concept is called as inversion of control. Okay. Now, same concept of inversion of control gets applied to creation of objects also. Ideally, it should be our responsibility to create the object of to-do controller. Can I say that? But what Spring does is, Spring says that Spring as an overall framework is based on the concept of inversion of control altogether. Spring says that the responsibility of a user is to create objects of their classes. But what I will do is I will take this responsibility from them. So as a developer, we will not be responsible for creating the objects of these classes. Who will be responsible for it? Spring is going to be responsible for it. First of all, are you guys able to understand this point? What is inversion of control? Okay. Now you might be thinking why Spring wants to take it. You might be having a question, why Spring wants to take it? Spring wants to take it because in very large projects, there can be humongous number of classes. Every class might be dependent on some other class, maybe you are having any kind of inheritance, or you are having any kind of, let's say, polymorphism going on. A lot of concepts might be going on, right? In that case, what can happen is that one class might be depending on a lot of other classes. And those other classes might be depending on other classes. They will be having their own class attributes, a lot of things. So at some place, what you have to do as a user or as a developer, you might have to add the logic of creation of object of each and every single class and then handle it here, right? So Spring says that in a very large project, doing that can be cumbersome and less manageable. So what Spring says is that I will create objects for you, right? I will create objects for you. And the objects that Spring is going to create for us in the world of Spring is referred as beans. Okay. So you can even Google about it. Like, you can say beans in Spring. Okay. Like this concept of Spring, like beans now is a very pretty general concept altogether, but you can see a bean in Spring is an object that is managed by Spring IOC container. I'll come to container. What is that container? But for the time, you can assume that, right? Spring IOC means Spring inversion of control. So bean in Spring is an object that is managed by Spring IOC. It is a fundamental component of Spring application and is responsible for carrying out specific tasks. Beans can be generated using annotations, XML configurations, or Java code. Are you guys able to get this point? So what is a bean? Bean is a object that is created and managed by Spring. Okay. And to manage and create, Spring has IOC containers or inversion of control containers. What is inversion of control?
giving the responsibility of our task to somebody else. So our task was to create objects. Spring has taken that task. And how it executes it? So there are two containers. One is called as application context and one is called as bean factory. Okay, so you can check bean factory in Spring versus application context in Spring, right? Generally, if you want to check any detailed, I would say, documentations or any concepts around Spring, this website Baildung is something that at least I refer rather than any other website. Okay, so you can see the first line. What does it say? Spring framework comes with two IOC container, two inversion of control containers. One is bean factory and one is application context. Bean factory is the most basic version of IOC containers. An application context kind of like extends the feature of bean factory. Are you able to get this point? These two containers are actually responsible for initializing your beans and managing them, handling everything around them. Are you guys able to get this point? Okay. Is this point making sense? Right. So that's how internally Spring is managing everything. So, and do you just remember it said that, right? You can create beans using annotations as well. So when we use the annotation REST controller, now Spring is responsible for creating the object of this to-do controller class. Are you guys able to get this point? Is this point making sense? Say yes or no in the chat, guys. And that object of to-do controller will be called as a bean. Yes, Rajat. Got it? Okay. So let's say we do one thing. Okay. We create a class. Let's say we create a class. Let's say we create a new class to do service. Okay. Let's say very plain, simple, basic class to do service we have created. Okay. And let's say this to do service has one method, public string let's say do something. For the timing, I'm just implementing a random method. Okay. And I'll say return something. Okay. Pretty simple. Can you see? It's a plain, simple to do service class, right? Now, what I'm going to do is, let's say in my to do controller, what I'm going to do is I'll say private to do service, to do service. Okay. Private to do service, to do service. Okay. And this should be to do service. Okay, cool. Now, can anybody tell me what is this statement referred as in object-oriented programming? In object-oriented programming, you call this as what? Composition. This is composition, right? Inheritance would be if one class inherits from other class. What is composition? Composition is you have kept instance of another class as your class property. Can I say that? Make sense, guys? Yes, the has a relationship. That to-do controller has a to-do service. Basic hoops. Okay, cool. Now, ideally, let's say in your to-do controller, there's a new to-do controller constructor, right? In the to-do controller constructor, what I can do is I can say this dot to-do service is equals to new to-do service. Okay. Now, can you see? I am managing initialization of this to-do service object. Can I say that? I am myself managing initialization of this to-do service object. Right? Yes or no? Cool. Now, why is that? Why I have to manage it? Because if you see the to-do service class, Spring doesn't know anything about this to-do service class. Yes or no? Spring knows nothing about this to-do service class. Yes or no, guys? Okay. That's why we have to handle it. That's why we have to handle it. Okay. So for example, let's say in your get to dos, if I say this dot, I should say, let's do one thing here is completed, and then plus let's do one thing like this dot to do service dot do something. Okay, I'm just calling this method here. Okay, let's do one thing. And why there is an error coming up? Oh, my bad. Cool. Let's run this code. Let's run this code and see what happens. Currently, that's a class created by me, and the initialization of the object is also handled by me. Okay. Now, if I send a request, can you see it is printing something? Why? Because I have created the object out of it. Cool. Now, just think about it. If I don't handle the initialization of this object, and let's say if I run my Java code, okay, you can see the server is up. If I make an API request, it throws an internal server error. And that's obvious. If you see the trace, it says null pointer exception. Why null pointer exception? Because this to-do service, I would say variable, is null. There is no instance attached to it. Can I say that? Yes or no, guys? So do you realize how cumbersome it can become if, let's say, we have a lot of has a relationship with a lot of services or a lot of things altogether? It can become pretty cumbersome, right? Now, what I can do is maybe I can let Spring Boot know about it. How about that? How about I can let Spring Boot know about it, that, okay, this is a particular class, right, that I want you to be aware about. Okay. So if you go to to-do controller, how we made Spring Boot know that, okay, this is a controller class which is going to handle request response cycle, and it is going, whatever you are going to return, write that in the response body using this REST controller annotation. If you go inside the REST controller annotation, can you see it has this controller annotation and response body annotation? If you go inside the controller annotation, can you see controller annotation as something like component? Can you guys see that? Every class that has the @component annotation is good enough to be managed by Spring. If you go inside component, right, you can see this is an interface, like this is the whole annotation that they have actually prepared. So what you can do is you can annotate this class as @component. You can annotate this class as @component. Now let's try to run this code. Again, still in the to-do controller, I am not handling initialization of the object. Let's see what happens now. If I send a request, can you see this is still giving me null pointer exception? Why do you think this is still giving me null pointer exception? Anyone? Why do you think this is still giving me null pointer exception? This is coming as null pointer exception because we have not mentioned that this to-do service object is going to come from where. We have mentioned that, okay, to-do service class is going to be handled by Spring, but my to-do service instance, it is going to get handled from where, right? Somebody has to bring it up, right? Somebody has to bring it up, or somewhere there should be some initialization that should come up, right? So what I can say is there is a concept called as dependency injection. In order to understand dependency injection, you need to understand, first of all, the dependency inversion principle. How many of you guys know what is dependency inversion principle? All those people who said no have not watched the solid principle classes. इसलिए prerequisite देख के आना होता है. How many of you guys know what is dependency inversion principle? Tell me, what is dependency inversion principle? भाई सॉलिड देख लो. सॉलिड देखे बिना जावा, मतलब बिना सॉलिड प्रिंसिपल जाने अगर तुम जावा डेव करना चाहते हो तो कुछ प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर टाइप बन जाओ, डेव मत बनो. और अगर अभी स्टार्ट कर रहे हो तो सॉलिड प्रिंसिपल बेयर मिनिमम पढ़ के करो. उसके लेक्चर ऑलरेडी मैंने अपलोड करे हुए हैं. Dependency inversion principle in simple terms says that we should depend on abstractions rather than concrete classes altogether. Can I say that? Okay. And in the lecture, I mentioned that in order to implement dependency inversion, in order to implement dependency inversion, we use something called as a dependency injection. Can I say that? Drop a quick yes or no in the chat. Remember, I specifically told that in frameworks like Spring, there is a concept called as dependency injection, right? So how you can do dependency injection? There are different ways. One of the ways is that, let's say, inside this to-do control. Now, when will be to-do controller's constructor function will be called? When will be the to-do controller's constructor function called? When Spring will initialize it. So what I'll say is, I'll say that when Spring will initialize this to-do service, okay, this to-do controller, whenever Spring will initialize this to-do controller, I want Spring to actually inject an object or pass or send an object of to-do service in this controller function. And what I will do is, I'll say this dot to-do service is equals to incoming to-do service, right? Now, how will Spring inject or send an object that I can assign to my property? Because I have said to Spring that it is a component, that means you have to manage it. Spring will automatically manage the beans of to-do service. If I, let's say, restart my code. Okay. And now if I send a request, let's see what happens. Can you see? Everything is working. Why? Because Spring has now actually managed the fact that Spring will create a to-do service object, and I want to get a to-do service object inside my controller. So Spring will automatically send it, because who is calling this constructor? Who is calling the constructor of to-do controller? Spring is calling the constructor of to-do controller. How many of you guys are able to get this point? Drop a quick question in the chat. That what is dependency injection? Right? So let's say, so ideally what should have been done? Ideally what should have been done is, there should have been an interface. Okay. Java class, call it as interface, to-do service interface. Okay. Or let's change the name here. Okay. So let's say I will call this as, let's rename. How do we rename here? Refactor, rename. Let's call it as fake to-do service. Okay. Refactor. Okay. Okay. So now I have mentioned it as fake to-do service. You can see here everywhere it is now fake to-do service. Okay. And instead of getting fake to-do service object, now currently my code is violating dependency inversion principle. So what ideally should have been done is, there should be an interface to-do service. This interface should have a method, public string, do something. Okay. And our fake to-do service should technically implement to-do service. Okay. And inside the to-do controller, instead of directly depending on concrete classes, I should depend on abstractions. To-do service, to-do service. And here also we will get an object of to-do service. Can you see? Now my to-do controller class is depending on abstraction. That is, it is depending on interface. It is not depending on concrete classes. Can I say that? Right? And I have a concrete class which is implementing my to-do service. Can I say that? Yes or no? And now if I will initialize my code, if I will run this code, and let's say if I send a request, can you see everything is working? Because now Spring is automatically figuring out that, okay, in the to-do controller, we were depending on an abstraction or an interface to do service. Which class has implemented to do service? Fake to do service class has implemented to do service. Right? Fake to do class has implemented to do service. And what it will do is, it will automatically figure out that fake to do service class object needs to be created, and that object need to be passed in the constructor of to-do controller. Here we are passing to-do service as argument to a constructor. I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement, but yes, whatever you're saying is correct. What is difference between auto-wired instead of this? Why we should do? Chetan, not answering your question because I've already said in the previous set of classes that if you already know some stuff, please don't tell me. I will come to it. मैं खुद से आऊंगा उस चीज के पास. अब मैंने बताया ही नहीं है अभी ऑटो वायर्ड क्या है. बाकी बच्चों की तुम सोच ही नहीं रहे हो. मैं अभी तुम किसी को भी क्लास में अनम्यूट करके बोलूंगा ना, 5 सॉलिड प्रिंसिपल एग्जांपल के साथ समझा दो, वो तुमसे समझाए नहीं जाएंगे. स्टेप बाय स्टेप चलो. पूरी क्लास तुम्हारा कोहॉर्ट है, तुम्हारे फ्रेंड्स है, सबके साथ सोच के चलो ना. मैं बताऊंगा तुम्हें ऑटो वायर्ड क्या है. हाथ जोड़ के बोल रहा हूँ भाई सबको. भाई मुझे पता है सबको स्प्रिंग आती है, ठीक है. डोंट गिव मी अ पोजीशन जहां पे मैं तुमसे सवाल करूं अनम्यूट करके और तुम ही जवाब ना दे पाओ. सबको सब आता है भाई, धीरे धीरे चलते हैं, ठीक है. So if Spring knows that it has to create an object, then why it is not creating it without us passing? Because Rajat, because let's say you have this composition here. Maybe you want to manually manage it, no? Maybe you want to manually manage it. You have to signify, you have to trigger Spring Boot that, hey, Spring Boot, you have to bring this object. If you will not mention it here, Spring Boot will think that, okay, you will manage it yourself. It's kind of like that. Okay. What if multiple, Raju, I'm coming to that point. So there is something called as qualifiers and everything. I'll come to that. What if there are multiple classes? Yes, same thing, Akash. I'm coming to that. Okay. Now, guys, what happens is this @component annotation is the one which helps Spring Boot to manage beans. Now, because Spring Boot has evolved a lot, Spring Boot has actually evolved a lot. So Spring Boot has, instead of just @component, has actually released a bunch of more Uber level annotations. Uber level means more high level annotations, right? For example, the @controller that I showed you, internally @controller depends on what? Internally @controller depends on @component. Can I say that? Can I say that, guys? Similar to that, there are more annotations like @service. So if I say @service, okay, if you see @service, internally it depends on @component. Okay, so service is to represent a service layer or a service, which is a class which is going to contain kind of like your business logic. Similar to that, there is @repository and so on. So ideally, instead of just component, we should say it as service because this sounds more verbose. Once we start our discussion on MVC, you will realize that why this service layer is important for us. Make sense, guys? Everybody, does that point make sense? Now a question might be coming to a lot of people mind that, okay, sir, you created an interface to do service and you implemented one class fake to do service out of it. What if there are multiple classes that are actually implementing this interface? Don't you think? What if there are multiple classes? And what will happen in that case? Is my point valid, guys? Is my point valid? Right? So, of course, Spring Boot has automatically handled this thing for you as well. Okay, Spring Boot has automatically handled this thing for you as well. So there are a bunch of annotations. There are a bunch of annotations that you can actually use in order to make sure that whatever class that you want should actually come up. Okay, so one of them is @primary. Okay, so let's say, for example, I create one more class, another to-do service. Okay, another to-do service. And let's say I say it implements to-do service. Okay, let's override the methods. Okay, and I'll say something from another to-do service. Now, the moment this happens, that there are multiple classes that is extending the same to-do service. And if you run the code, okay, see what's happening? It has started your server, right? Now let's see what happens. If I run my code, send the request, can you see? it is still getting things from something. Okay. If you go to to-do controller, right? Can you see this to-do service? This to-do service is still getting what? Fake to-do service, this one. Now, why is that? Because currently my another to-do service is not managed by Spring. So if it is not managed by Spring, Spring doesn't know about it. Can I say that? Can you see? I have not given any annotation. So it is not managed by Spring. Okay, cool. So let's make it managed by Spring. So I'll say at that service. Now it is managed by Spring. Now if you run the code, can you see it will not even allow you to run the code because it's a direct conflict. Spring was trying to create the objects to make sure that this dependency injection later works, but it cannot auto wire. It says it cannot auto wire. Now, what is this word auto wire? Auto wire in Spring. Okay, this word auto wire. Auto wire is a concept using which Spring frameworks allow you to inject objects directly, right? So currently what we are doing is we are doing a constructor based dependency injection, right? There is a way in which what Spring says that instead of doing constructor based dependency injection like this, if you want Spring Boot to manage this composition, you can say @auto wired. The moment you see @auto wired, see, it marks a constructor field setter method or a config method to be auto wired by dependency injection facilities. That means you say that I don't want to handle it in a constructor, in a setter or anything. Spring Boot, you automatically handle it. Now the problem is this kind of auto wiring, or maybe the constructor based dependency injection, whatever you were trying to do, like you were expecting Spring Boot to manage it, right? Either you use that auto wired or you use these kind of constructor dependency injection or anything. In whatever way you were expecting Spring Boot to manage it. But now Spring Boot cannot manage it due to collision. Can I say that? There is a collision altogether now. Yes or no? So there is a annotation called as @primary in Spring Boot. Okay. There is an annotation called as @primary. So you can see why is @primary needed? In some cases, we need to register more than one bean of same type. Can I say that? One bean of same type. What is the type? To do service. Fake to do service is also of type to do service. Another to do service is also of type to do service. So we need to register bean of this particular type. Can I say that? So what you can actually do is you can use this @primary. Let's try it out for a moment. Let's try it out. Let's say here, if I add an annotation @primary. Let's see what happens if this works for us or not. If you run this code, can you see now the code works fine? Even in the to-do controller, this error is gone. And now if you send the code, you can see something from another to-do service. So what this @primary says that if you have multiple implementation of a same bean type, then you can mark one of them as primary, that always this is going to be preferred. But of course, this doesn't solve the problem for us because maybe one controller needs another to-do service, whereas there is a different controller which needs fake to-do service. There can be a case, right? We can't just make one of them as primary and then just don't use the other one. Can I say that? Yes or no? So in that case, what you have is you have another annotation called as @qualifier. Sir, here bean type is to do service, right? Yes, Rachel, you are thinking in the right direction. Okay. Guys, first of all, do you understand the problem and do you understand the primary based solution that I'm proposing here? Can I say that? Everybody, are we on the same page that there existed a problem that there can be multiple implementations, and now we are into a situation where we sometimes maybe we want to do service, sometimes maybe we want fake to do service. Sorry, another to do service, sometimes we want fake to do service. So I have a dot. I understood component. What is the use of service? Please tell me once. So Somnath, component annotation when you give to a class, it becomes manageable by Spring. Now, in actual real life applications, when you write backend servers, then there are different layers in your project, like different part of code in your project. Some part of code is responsible for DB interaction. Some part of code is responsible for business logic. Some part of code is just responsible for collecting and sending back HTTP request and response. So what, and we will talk about this once we start discussion around MVC architecture and everything. So what Spring Boot has given is, Spring Boot has given, let's say on @ component, it has given some parent annotations, which internally uses @ component only. You can see @ service is internally doing what? Just using @ component only, right? But it's just that it is just now going to mark it as a service layer, that here generally people will handle their business logic only. Are you able to get this point? Okay, you can mark it with something else also, like you can mark it with @ there is one thing called as @ repository. Okay, if you see in repository also you have same @ component, but generally you don't mark it with repository, because ideally according to Spring conventions you should have marked it repository in case you are doing any DB interactions here. If it is going to handle business logic, that's your service layer, then you should have marked it with @ service. Make sense? Yes, or maybe you can make your own, I would say, annotations also, which internally uses @ component. Okay, I'll come to more about what is @ service, what is @ repository. For till the time we don't know about what is service layer, what is repository layer, there is no point of discussing that. For now, you can assume that these are parent, you can say, annotations, which internally has the access to @ component. Okay. Yes, then also Somnath, it will work. But you will see later that we want to define something like a service layer. We want to define something like a repository layer. There, these annotations will come handy. We will see that. Got it, everybody? Okay, cool. Now, as I mentioned, @ primary might not be the best case for you. So you can search for @ qualifier for Spring Boot. Okay, so you can see there is a @ qualifier annotation. Now, here you can see what you can do is you can add @ qualifier annotation and mention the name of the class that you want to inject here. And where do you mention name of this class? When you are actually mentioning your component, there you can mention name of your class. So let's see. So for example, if you go to another to do service, in this service, let's say I mention it as another to do service. Okay. And in fake to do service, I mention it as fake to do service. Okay. And let's now remove primary. Okay. Let's remove primary from here. Close it. And now for to do controller. Now in to do controller here, what I can do is I can say @ qualifier, and I can mention whatever service I want. Let's say I want fake to do service. So I'll say fake to do service. Now what will happen is this is going to automatically inject fake to do service here, right? And you don't need to pass it as a constructor here. And you can say @ autowired. What happens with @ autowired? In @ autowired, you don't need to do separately constructor dependency injection. It will automatically bring up, I would say, the bean and attach it here. If I run this code, let's see for a moment. Can you see no error coming up? If I make a request, can you see it just says something? And which function was returning something? Fake to do services function was returning something. Instead of this, if I write another to do service and run this code and send it, can you see this time now it is injecting something from another to do service? How many of you guys are able to get this point? Drop a quick yes or no in the chat. Omkar says, I remember blindly copy pasting these annotations work. Now I know the real meaning. That's the part that's interesting about Spring Boot, that once you start going inside that, okay, what is the meaning of this qualifier? In which case this qualifier will come up? What is controller? Why not? What is REST controller? How it is different from controller? Why do you want to mention it? That's where things start coming handy. Okay. Now, let's say you don't want to use auto-wired. Why do you not want to use auto-wired? You can see automatically nowadays Spring is mentioning that auto-wired injections should not be done. Okay, they don't recommend using auto-wired. Why, I will talk about in a moment. But ideally, you should not do auto-wired here. So what you should do is you should do constructor injection only. Now, how do you do constructor injection? Let me show you. So say to do service. Okay, and here what I can do is this @ qualifier, instead of mentioning directly there, I can mention it here. Okay, I can mention it here. Now also things will work fine for us. If you run it, can you see the server is up? Right? And if I send it, one second. One second. Why this says null? This is dot to do service, to do service, to do service, to do service, to do service. I have not called. Oh, my bad. Yeah, I have not said this dot to do service is equals to do service. My bad. Let's run it again and send it. Can you see things are working? And what is getting called? Something from another to do service is called. Primary is like a default value that you can say. Can you recap primary and this one once? Vinayak, you know the problem, what we have in hand? You know the problem, what we have in hand? Vinayak Gupta, do you know the problem? Yes, managing them. Yes. So if you use @prime, let's say you have 3 classes and Spring is not able to identify which one of them is going to be injected in this particular interface object, right? So you can put @primary in any one of them. What will happen is Spring will always take that primary class. It's kind of like setting a default value. Make sense? Okay. Now, that's not a good case, right? For example, why that might not be a good case? Let's think about it. Let's say you want a to-do service here. Let's say you want another to-do service. Let's say private to-do service 2. Okay. Let's say this to-do service, I want another, inside this to-do service, I want an instance of another to-do service object. And in to-do service 2, I want fake to-do service object. Make sense? How will we handle this? Can I say that? Rachel, can you see that's the case that I'm talking about? Okay. Vinayak, do you see a problem here? How do we handle both of them? I want both of them now. Waiting for your response, Vinayak. Yep. So now what I will say is that there is a annotation called as @qualifier. What you can say is that you can say we were doing dependency injection like this, to do service, and to do service 2, and we were doing this dot to do service is equals to do service. This dot to do service 2 is equals to do service 2. This is how we were doing dependency injection. Can I say that? Okay. Now, if the first object you want as another to do service, what you can do is @qualifier of another to do service. And where have you defined this name? Where have you defined this name? You have defined this name here in this annotation. Okay. And here you can say, and let's clean it up a bit. So this one, and then I say @qualifier fake to do service. That's it. You can see that's how you can actually manage your controller. Now you have access to both the services, right? And Spring will manage which bean to allocate to which one of them. Are you able to get this point? Yes, Vinayak, like ideally what we can do is there's something called as this configuration application.properties. We can mention it here and access the value from here. I will show it, but in further set of classes. Like there is a value property that you can directly access from here. So inside your application properties configuration, you can set it. I didn't get your question, sir. Instead of Somnath says, sir, instead of writing qualifier in constructor, we can write just above property. Can you share me a code that you are like, what kind of implementation you are referring to? Can you tell me that, Somnath? Yes, Rajat. Yeah, those, of course, those kind of cross combinations you can do. Pawan, I'm coming to that. Guys, I will, in today's class only, we'll cover why we should prefer constructor-based injection rather than auto-wire. That's also a Spring community guideline also, but I'll wait for a moment and see if there are any questions from this particular part. Navina says, if we forgot to set the object in constructor, we got similar error without having dependency. Then why dependency injection? Navina, do you know what is dependency inversion? Okay. Now, I believe your question is not why dependency injection. Your question is, why do you want to pass this object in the constructor? Is that correct? That's a more fundamental doubt that you have. Okay. Why do you want to pass this object here? You need to initialize this composition somewhere. Either you will manually do it or Spring Boot will do it. Can I say that? Okay. If you want to manually do it. That's a straightforward thing. If you want Spring Boot to do it, Spring Boot expects some protocols. What are those protocols? One protocol is you annotate this property with @autowired. In that case, you don't need to do any dependency constructor injection, and it will automatically handle allocation. Or you can use dependency injection from constructor, and then you have to mention that, okay, in the constructor, please give me a bean of this to-do service, and I will allocate it here. Because if you received a bean from Spring, then what to do after that? Allocate it on this particular property. Because think about it, no? Let's say you have now there are two to-do service compositions. If I do not do this, how does the Spring knows that you want to allocate to-do service to to-do service 2 and to-do service to to-do service? Like Spring will not be able to handle this matching, right? Are you able to get this point? Somnath, see, here we are defining this name, the to-do control, the name that we are saying here in the string, another to-do service. You can give it any name, Sanket, like this, and then just go here and make this @service Sanket. Then also it will work. If I run the code, things will work properly. Make sense, Somnath? I guess that answers your question. There is also, yes, there is also one thing called as setter injection. We'll cover that in the next part. It's a Spring thing. So there is an interesting question from Vinayak. Like all of this that, sir, you are talking about, is it a Spring thing or a Spring Boot thing? These are all Spring concepts. If you forget to, I answered that question, I guess. Yes, sure, Somnath. Let's bring Somnath on call. Hi, Somnath.
Hi, sir. Sir, I'm asking that as you wrote, means if I will write the qualifier another to-do service just above the property where we have described that composition, yeah. It will not write the qualifier inside the constructor. Then will it work or not? Suppose for the both the things, another to-do service and fixed to-do service, if we write it above the property, yeah.
No, no,
individually?
no.
Well,
You
sir,
tell me why. You tell me why.
uh,
As a programmer, don't think as
hmm,
a web developer, don't think as a Spring Boot developer. Think as a programmer, what is the problem?
then
Now let me answer this.
mm, yes, sir. I think sequentially which one
No,
to run.
no. In programming,
Yes, sir.
what thing stores a value?
Pardon, sir.
In programming,
Hmm,
what is the thing that stores a value in your memory?
using variable.
Variable, very good. Can I say line number 19 and 22 is what? A variable?
Yes, we can say as object reference.
Fundamentally, it is a variable.
Yes, sir.
It's a fundamental variable. I said, no, think about a programmer.
Yes, sir.
Okay? It's a variable. Cool. Variable is the bucket inside which you store the object or store the value. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If you are using constructor based dependency injection, then your values are coming in the constructor argument. Can I say that?
Hmm,
Yes or no?
yes.
These are the values or the objects that will be stored in the variable bucket. Okay.
Yes.
Now, this decision of whether you have to use fake to do service or another to do service, this decision you need to make for the bucket or for the variable. Oh, sorry, for the bucket or for the object. Or I should say for a variable or for the object. This decision you need to make for what?
For the object.
For the object. So where you should mention it?
At the
Where
constructor
you are
level.
passing the object that will be stored in the bucket. Can I say that? Okay, stay on call, stay on call. Can I say that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, a lot of you guys must be thinking that, sir, but previously you did something
Yes.
where when you were mentioning @qualifier here
Hmm.
and @qualifier here, then also it was working. What was that? Right?
Yes.
If you want to make it work from here, that means, first of all, you don't want to do dependency injection inside the constructor. What do you want to do is, you want to do something called as a field injection. Field injection means this is a field, or you can say a class variable. Can I say that?
Yes, sir.
Or no?
Yes.
Here, Spring Boot gives you a provision that you can use something like @autowired. @autowired. What @autowired does is, it does something called as a field injection. It does something called as a field injection. In this field injection, what it will do is, you don't need to separately go to the constructor and allocate a value here. What it will do is, it will automatically bring an object and allocate it to this particular variable. That's where you can mention it here. But can you see there is a warning coming up which automatically says field injection is not recommended? Everybody, are you guys able to see?
Hmm.
Why? Because fundamentally, this field injection has a bunch of problems. First, you cannot keep these field injection properties final. Okay, so these are always reassignable. That's one problem. Apart from that, these field injections make the overall testing procedure, when you will write unit tests and everything for your code, it makes the testing procedure hard. Okay. Apart from that, there can be a case that, let's say, to-do controller is depending on to-do service, then to-do service is depending on to-do controller. There can be circular dependency that can come due to autowired. Are you able to get this point? Okay. That's why Spring by default recommends, do not use field injection and instead use this.
And sir, in real life project, we don't use this field injection, no?
yes, in real projects, like at least wherever I have worked with, you don't do field injection directly. There might be some legacy projects where you might see it, but that's not the like it's not a recommended practice by Spring Boot community. Okay, because if you do this constructor injection, then you can make your fields final also, right? It leads to easier testing altogether, right? And you know which dependencies are where mentioned, so chances of circular dependency is also reduced. Make sense, Somnath?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Got it.
Thank you, Somnath, for coming on call. No, ordering doesn't matter, Ajit. I already answered that question later, earlier in the last class. Omkar says, even my merge request was rejected at work due to this. Now I understood why. Yes, because it's a fundamental problem. You can't make something final. That's a pretty regular thing that you have to do in Java projects altogether. Can I say that? Okay. So now I believe Spring creates only one instance of. Okay, Pawan, that's not correct. There are provisions in which you can set whether you want just a single object. So, okay, so Pawan has a question. Spring creates only one instance of that object and use it in multiple classes? Not always. Not always. There are provisions in which you can define the bean lifecycle. Okay, you can actually define your bean lifecycle. Your bean lifecycle can be singleton. What does mean by singleton? Singleton means one object will be used everywhere altogether. Or you can define your, and I don't think it's called as lifecycle, it's called as scope. Or you can make it something like prototype. I was about to cover it in the next class, but okay, you have asked it, so we'll cover it here. You can make it either singleton or you can make it prototype. Prototype means it will create a new instance for every injection. Okay. You can make it also request. Like for example, if you're using a controller, you can make a bean type as request, and then for every single HTTP request response lifecycle, there will be a new object and so on. There are multiple ones. So you can just check how to set bean scope of service as prototype. Okay. So you can see there is a @ scope annotation that comes up, and you can set the scope as prototype. By default, scope is set to singleton. Okay. So what we can do is you can say @ scope. We were about to talk about it in the next class, but okay. @ scope as prototype or whatever you want. And you can take a look at @ scope. You can see it is going to define scope for whatever values you have. You can see scope can be singleton, scope can be prototype, scope can be request, it can be based on session, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can use it. Yes, Vinayak has a very interesting question, and I believe that's the only question I was looking for. Is there any use case for having two services of same type in a single controller? We can have different methods in service objects, two for different logic too, right? Vinayak, just think about it. Let's say this fake to-do service, instead of fake to-do service and another to-do service, think about we are, let's say, building something like, for example, what should I say? Let's say we are building an e-commerce app, and inside our e-commerce app, we have multiple payment gateways. Okay. Right. One payment gateway is Razorpay, one payment gateway is Stripe. For a particular type of request, let's say for a particular type of a payment, I always want to use Razorpay. But let's say if the payment is international, we can't use, let's say, Razorpay. I have to use Stripe. So in that case, you might be needing two instances in the same controller. Make sense? Same advantage, disadvantage that comes with a normal static variable. It's going to be loaded with class. It will delay the class load time, but it will be available throughout the life cycle of a class object because it will be independent of the object, will be directly attached to the classes. Same thing that exists with the static, Chirag. No, like adapter design pattern is not for that. because maybe there are different, not just because you are thinking about adapter pattern, because maybe you want to say that, okay, whatever were the request parameters for Razorpay, maybe I'll pass it through an adapter which will get converted for example, what do you say, Stripe. That won't be the correct way. Instead, yes, strategy pattern could have been one thing that you could have used. But there can be cases, let's say, maybe you want to do something like this. Maybe you want to do that, always use Razorpay. In case, let's say you make a request to Razorpay and you realize that Razorpay is down, then what? Then you want to make a request to Stripe. In that case, you need to have both of them alive. Then strategy pattern also will not work. Mohit Sinha, can I say that? Ashish, it doesn't support it. Vinayak, does that answer your question? Let's say you want to first of all check if Razorpay is available, always use Razorpay. But in between something happened, then you want to immediately move to Stripe. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example. I know, of course, there can be different applications that we could have thought of, but like it was something immediate. Make sense, guys? Yes, of course, Vinayak. Like again, I'm giving you a hypothetical situation. To solve one thing, there can be different ways of doing something. Also, Vinayak, like technically, you are thinking just because I have one controller. And inside one controller, I'm using 2 to-do service. Think about now, let's say we have 5 controllers and 5 to-do service. Implementation of to-do service, 5 implementation of to-do service. In one controller, I want fake to-do service. In another controller, I want another to-do service. Conflict will still exist. You need qualifier there also. Can I say that? 2 instances and 1 object. This line doesn't make any sense because instance and object is same. Make sense, Vinayak? Like you can think about a situation where you want to have 2 compositions of a same type, right? But of course, there can be other ways to do that as well. I'm just giving you hypothetical examples. Got it? For example, maybe for testing, if you're writing a test class, if you're writing a unit test class, then you cannot make your API gateways and everything. If you're writing a unit test, you have to make it corresponding to that maybe. No, you can still set as primary. And then let's say, if you have not set a qualifier something separately somewhere, it will automatically bring it from primary. Make sense, Aryan? That can be kind of like a default value that you want to take. Multiple instances of service type in one implementable but controller. Got that? Yes, Vinayak. Think about now. Let's say you have to add a unit test. In a unit test file, maybe you want multiple instances of your service or fake services. Okay. So again, there can be situations, there can be alternative, better solutions as well. But you said, na, think about a situation where we want this. So these can be some situation when you might want it, but of course, better solutions at least. Okay. Think about, let's say you don't have an API gateway, it's a monolith, then what? Yes. Think about, no, we don't have an API gateway, we just have one single service monolith, that's it. It's a very simple, small project. Then what? We can't expect everybody to have an API gateway. Okay. Cool. So do you guys now understand, like, I believe these questions were coming up from last to last and last class as well, that how exactly annotations are like handling things, what is going on behind the scenes. Now we know there is something called as Bean, there is something called as Bean Factory that's creating Bean for you. Then automatically we saw that, okay, if you don't let Spring know that you are going to handle something for it, then it like until unless we let Spring know that Spring has to handle it for us, it will not automatically handle it. You have to manually handle it, and that can be pretty cumbersome for pretty complex projects. In that case, this @component like annotations comes into the picture. Now we saw that, okay, there can be problem of dependency inversion. In order to solve that, we can maybe use dependency injections, or maybe use field injection. But field injection is not deprecated, but not recommended. Then what happens if you have multiple classes and class implementation of the same service? All of that. Are you guys able to understand? Raju, it is already up. Can you please check? Mohit, so I will be like in the next class, there will be a situation when use inside our to do API Spring application, the main Spring application class, I will manually override the bean creation. We can also manually override the bean creation. That's where @bean will come into the picture. That's also what we can do. I'll show you. It's all about like how much you want to play. I have never tried with XML. I can show you with the Java code. That's what I'm mentioning, right? I will manually override it with the Java code. You can use @bean annotation and you will be able to do that. What can be the use case of the scope thing? I am unable to. We'll come to that. मतलब मैंने बोला वो already मैं discuss करना था. What is the scope? When do you want a singleton class? When do you want a new initialization of every class? So on and so forth. We'll talk about that. Don't worry. Yes, there can be n number of controller classes. Every class might be handling different routes altogether. Okay. So currently, like this week, we spent most of the time to understand Spring, like REST APIs, preparing REST APIs, and like playing around internals of Spring altogether. Now, what we'll do is in the next week, we are going to talk about MVC very in depth around concepts around MVC. Why do you need MVC? And like a broader, or I would say extended version of MVC, we are going to talk about. We'll also talk about things like how you can manually override bean, what are scopes, few more annotations, and I will also help you to create your own annotation. I'm not sure how many of you guys know how to create your own annotation, but we will also try to create at least our own basic annotation. That's also what we are going to do. And then we can maybe start gearing things up. Sorry, Vinayak, your question was so big, I lost it in between. If we implement an interface in multiple classes and we use dependency injection and IOC, if we have a class in that implementation, if we implement an interface in multiple classes, okay, and we take a class in that implementation that has some function out of that interface that we define in dependency class member. Can you, Vinayak, would it be possible for you to just do one thing? Whatever is your situation, prepare a dummy code, send it on Discord, tee it out group. Let's discuss it there, I believe. Okay. Cool. That being said, let's wrap today's session here, guys. We are going to meet soon in the next session, and we'll try to make sure that we talk about more internals of Spring so that we understand not only just how to get things done, but also understand how internally they are being done. Till then, take care, guys. Bye-bye. Have a really lovely week ahead and keep putting, guys.